Been doing some step-by-step assembly videos or blogs or vlogs for our new crepe paper flowers. So we came out with 6 floral designs, all of which are geared to work specifically with crepe paper, although you can use them with sculpting foam and cardstock as well still. But today my task is to show you how to create the Wild Peony. So it's this die set by Lisa Jones, this one right here, and it is a beautiful set. You can make individual flowers like this, or you can even make full bouquets like this one. I'm really excited to show you how to put this one together. I am going to show you how to make a really full bloom like this. However, you can also make them a little bit smaller. You can make them you can close them up in really tight buds if you wanted to. That's the beauty about crepe paper. You can make realistic flowers, but you can also tailor them to what you want. So if you wanted to create a realistic bouquet, you could have ones that were slightly open, ones that were fully open and blooming. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to switch to an overhead camera so that you can see how we put this together. I am going to be using the Serenity crepe paper pack, but we do have 3 crepe paper packs, and I will go through the details on the crepe paper and all of the different ways you can do it. I'm going to be doing lots of tips and tricks as I go through this, so let's head on over to the overhead camera. Okay, so we're going to learn how to put together the Wild Peony flower today. If you've been following along, like I said earlier, we've been kind of going through the assembly of how to create all of the 6 floral designs that we came out with this past month. And one thing I do want to point out is that these dies are specifically geared to work with crepe paper. However, they will work with cardstock and sculpting foam, but what's nice about these is that the dies themselves were specifically designed to work with the grain of crepe paper. So when you're working with crepe paper, in order to manipulate it to get it to the shapes that you want, you need your grain, you need to cut with the grain. So I'm going to pull this one up a little bit closer. You can see I've got a vertical grain. Now I obviously want my petals to cut with the grain because then I can manipulate the petals outward, going in a horizontal direction to make them wider. If I cut them this way, they would stretch vertically, which is not what I want to do. So it's always important when you're working with crepe paper to make sure that you're cutting with the grain. So the Wild Peony die set comes with these 5 dies. You get 2 large petals right here. You get 2 medium petals in this set right here, and then you get this one, which is an attached 2-sided petal, and this is meant to be the center of the flower. It's what kind of goes up and around the bead or the styrofoam ball or the smashed together crepe paper that you've made into a ball for the flower, the center of your flower, which this flower you do need something at the top of your floral wire if you're going to be using floral wire, because you need to work around the ball. Then you've also got this die piece that comes with that you can create the stamens with on a peony. You obviously got really beautiful centers, and then you also get a leaf that comes with it. So there are 3 crepe paper packs that we came out with. There's Color Splash, Vintage, and Serenity. I am working with 3 of the colors from the Serenity pack today. You can make peonies any color you want. I decided to go with a light coral color because all the ones I've created so far are in the purple or pink family, and I wanted to do something just a little bit different. But before I get started, I want to talk about the crepe paper just a little bit. So these come in packs of 10. You get 10 different colors in each pack that we have available of the 3, but they are all sized 12 inches in height by 24 inches in width. And what's beautiful about this crepe paper, if you're familiar with crepe paper at all, is that there's different types of stretch. So you've got lightweight crepe paper, you've got heavyweight crepe paper, and lightweight is very delicate, and heavyweight handles maintaining the shape of a flower that you're working with. And ours is kind of somewhere in between. I think it definitely errs more towards the heavy side, but it's not as firm and stiff as the heavyweight that you typically would see on the market. So that is nice because it gives you that delicate ability, but it still maintains the shape, which is really nice. And I also wanted to point out that our new fold and form tool was created to work with the petals so that you can manipulate the shape and curve the different petals. So with the rose in particular, the classic rose, this is beautiful for getting that curved shape that you want, and also with the fringed tulip, being able to really curve under or over some of those fringed pieces at the top. So definitely going to be using that today. I've got our glue gun accessory mat out, and I've got my glue gun off to the side. You're going to need, I'm making mine on a floral stem today. So I've got a long piece of floral wire, and then I've got a styrofoam ball that I'm going to be working with. But you can use wood beads. You can use, I know that there's a lot of different ones on the market that you can use for that floral center if you want. Crepe paper can be cut with big dies as long as it goes in the direction of the grain. Thinlits dies, which is what we're using right here. It is a really versatile collection. I think a lot of times people think, oh, you can only make flowers. You actually can do a lot with crepe paper aside from flowers. Obviously, that's the number one thing most people use it for, but you could definitely use this for party decor, to create banners or to create like little piñatas. You can make single flowers or full bouquets. You can do home decor pieces. I've seen some really cool three-dimensional art. There's a limitless supply of possibilities. And then what's really nice about crepe paper is because it is so, the ability to really mold everything allows you to make everything super realistic. And what is another great thing, and I'm not doing that today on mine, but I do want to mention this because of crepe paper, is that you can shade everything. So you can take these petals after you've cut them, you can put permanent markers and shade them, you can use pan pastels, you can use acrylic paint. There's a lot of different things that you can use to actually add color and create shadowed effects. You can hand paint little dots on. So even though most people see crepe paper flowers and they're just like, oh, I'm going to cut that color, you actually can make them super realistic. A few other ideas that we've seen recently, garlands, flower crowns. You can make these as big or small as you want. You can make your wreaths and change them out seasonally for whatever holiday is coming up. So crepe paper, as much as people think it's always for flowers, it can be, but you can also do fringe and add them onto tags, or I see people actually taking these in strips in their scrapbook pages and then using a sewing machine to get it to bunch up so you can create a really pretty fringe on your scrapbook pages or cards. So while I'm going to be creating flowers today, the crepe paper does allow you to make a lot of other versatile projects. So I do want to go through for this particular flower how many petals you need to cut. At bare minimum, I recommend cutting at least 3 or 4 of your center one, at least 6 to 8 of the medium and large petals, and at least 3 stamens, because what you're going to do is you're going to glue the ends of the stamen together and then wrap them around. So you can put petals or leaves on if you want. I usually like to cut 2 or 3, but realistically, the more full you want, or the fuller you want your flower to be, the more you're going to cut petals. And if you want something a little bit more open, you're going to cut less petals. But at the bare minimum to make this flower, I think that you need to cut at least 6 of each of these 2 and just about 3 of these. So I'll leave that with that. I'm going to pull these out of the way. I've already cut all my petals, and I have on a lot of them already molded them, but I've got a few here that I have not molded, so I can show you how I typically mold my petals to make them a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to start with the outer petals, or actually I'll start with the inner ones. We'll start with the inner and work our way out. So because this needs to work around a ball or some kind of circular centerpiece, you really want this piece to curve in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumbs and my pointer fingers, and I'm going to manipulate this into a curved shape. So you can kind of see I created like a dome, and I'm pulling this. It's got 150% stretch, which is nice, so it more than doubles its size. But I want ones that are going to be a little bit looser, and I want ones that are going to be really tight around that centerpiece. So I'm doing mine very much towards the center so that some of these will curl up and around the ball and cover it and make it feel more realistic, because I think with peonies especially, you get that really tight effect around the flower stamen. Then you've got your medium petals. Now obviously, depending on if you want, I'm going to pull this bouquet in real quick. If you want fuller, more open kind of flowers, then that will determine how you kind of shape and mold. So I want ones that are open. I don't want them to be super closed. So if you wanted them to be super closed, you would really manipulate this into like a dome shape. Now because I want mine slightly open, I'm only doing that little bottom piece right here. And then what I even do is I pull this apart so it creates a little bit of a fringe effect across the top, which just means your petals are a little bit more organic. I'll take my crease and curl, I'll even, manipulate some of these petals to curve more over or to have some curve in, which is what you really find when you see them in real life. So I've got more of an organic shape when I'm putting these on. So I'm going to do the same with this one. I'm going to just kind of create that dome effect just on the bottom half. If I really wanted it to be a little bit more open, I'd actually go a little bit higher up and pull them apart that way. So I'm just going to, again, I'm going to probably go the opposite on this one and just really get that shape behind. You can also take this end and use it to really shape the top of those. So it just depends on what you want. That's the beauty of crepe paper. You can decide exactly how you want yours to look. Now the outer petals, because I'm creating a fuller bloom, is I want these to be very open. So I'm going to actually go more towards the middle and create a really big petal. And I'll alternate this. So I'll do some that are like this, and then I'll do some that are just a little bit more closed, because you're working from the outer and you can manipulate these so that they open more full. So like on some of these, I will just take this and turn this the other way, and you'll see when I glue them onto the stem that it then feels like it's more open. So I've got all of those. I'm going to hold off on showing you how to do the leaves until it's time, but I've got all my petals. I cut quite a few because I wanted a fuller flower, but I have I've done 4 of the centers, and I've done about 10 petals, maybe 10 or 12 of each of the other 2 sizes, and I've cut 3 stamens. So when you're starting with this flower, you're going to cut an oval shape to go over and cover your flower center. So I'm going to stretch this out, put a little bit of hot glue on, and work my shape around that. Okay. And you'll see I'm literally just manipulating it over the flower, and then I'll start tucking it in. Now, this isn't always going to be beautiful, and that's okay because most of the flowers will cover up those edges. So I'm just going to add some more hot glue around the bottom and just really tuck in. You can also use your glue gun accessories on your fingers if you don't like getting burned, because I know I don't, but because I've done these so many times, I actually know how to avoid getting burned. So I'm going to just take my Sizzix scissors and I'm going to cut away the excess. And then I'll just tuck in those final pieces. So I just really manipulate the crepe paper around that centerpiece till I get it really nice and tight around whatever center ball that I'm using. Okay, so got this piece. So the next thing to do is to make my stamens all connect so that I can then wrap them around. So what I'd like to do with these is I like to pull them a little bit further apart so you get a more of a longer stamen. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll glue the ends to each other. And once that's done, then I will do, I'll twist them a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little dab of glue right there. You don't need a lot with crepe paper. And I'm going to put these two pieces together. And then I'm going to do the same at the end of this one. And obviously if you want a fuller stamen, just cut more and keep adding them on. I find it's easier to connect them before I put them onto the flower. It just gives me more stability when I'm wrapping it. Then what I'll do is I'll wrap them like this and I'll twist. That way I get more of some organic kind of textures. That way they don't all look like they're going the same direction. And then when you put them on the flower, they look a little bit more realistic. So what I'll do is I'll add probably towards this little end of the half right here. I'm going to put glue all along there. And then I will start kind of halfway up the ball on this one, this particular flower, and just start to glue it around that core. You're just going to follow it around, just adding little dashes of glue here and there and making it really tight around the ball. You can stretch as you go. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm in frame for you. When you're having to pay attention to where you're gluing, sometimes you get out of focus a little bit. So I love how already that's starting to feel like a realistic floral. And I know Jess and I, flowers are our favorite thing to work with. I know Josh and Pete would love the opportunity every now and then, but we beat them to it a lot of the time because we're so excited to work with them. But Pete and Josh actually have some great ideas, and I'm really excited to see what they come up with in the coming months with crepe paper. I know they'll take it some really cool artistic direction. Okay, so now I've got my little flower piece, and then if you want, you can even go in and rough it up even more, scrunch them down, whatever you feel like. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of this, and I would actually recommend, it's depending on the floral wire you're working with, some are a little bit stiffer, this one's not as stiff. So I'm going to actually take my die pick, and I'm going to punch a little bit of a hole right in the center of this connected petal so that I can then put the wire through it and slide it up. Okay, so slide it up, and because I want this really nice and tight around my flower, I'm going to actually glue right here at the bottom so that it curves up nice and tight around the stem. And you're going to do that on both sides. And then you're just going to keep building your layers. So now I'm gonna just pre-poke my holes so I can add them on to the stems a lot easier. You don't have to poke holes in the other ones because they just layer around this. So this is the only one that if you don't have a really stiff wire, you're going to need to take your die pick and just poke it because otherwise it might ruin your crepe paper. So now I'm going to alternate the pattern around where, so I get like a fuller, like a square effect rather than it being in the same position. So you're going to alternate your petals. And they don't have to be perfect. I think the beauty of flowers is some are very structured and some are not. Some are meant to be a little bit more wild. They don't all look the same. Peonies tend to look similar, but I've actually seen some different varieties. I actually just bought some that were really wild when they opened up. They were not structured at all. I think they were butterfly peonies. They were different than any other traditional peony I'd seen. And the wild peonies are different than traditional ones. So that's nice. What's nice about this is that you can kind of manipulate the petals into a more traditional, like closed shape, or you can make them loose and open and wild, which I think that's kind of fun. It gives you a little bit of versatility with it. So you'll see I'm just putting glue at the very bottom, and I'm doing it really tight because with my next row of petals, the medium petals, I'm going to start loosening it up. I'm going to start some of the petals higher, and then I'll start some lower as I work my bloom the direction I want. And what's nice is, like, if I don't like the shape, I can go in and even keep manipulating the petals. If I'm like, you know what, this isn't curved enough for me, so I'm going to actually curve it in at the top a little bit. So as you can see, the flower's starting to form. I'll keep playing with the petals as I go. That's usually what I do. And the more, crepe paper seems to be a little bit intimidating for people, but honestly, the more you work with it, the easier it gets. I am by no means an expert on this. I still watch tutorial videos myself to learn new techniques and better ways to shape, because I think sometimes that's the most intimidating part about the petals, is not getting the shapes perfect, which if you're a perfectionist like me can be very tough when you're learning something new. But now that I've been kind of playing with these for a few months, it's become a lot less intimidating, and it's actually really fun when you put the flower together and you go, oh, I think that actually looks like the flower. So I've been quite proud of myself as I keep learning how to shape the petals a little bit better each time. Okay, so I've got my center. Now you could stop there if you wanted. If you wanted to do just a simple flower that didn't look like a peony, you could stop right there and like have a nice little bloom. I'm going to now start adding on my other petals. So on these, I will just put glue, what I call in a V shape. So I go in a V, and then this is where I actually start to work upside down, personally. This is what works for me. I'll go in and I'll add the petal, and then I'll flip it over, see if I like the placement. I might pull them out a little bit more. I actually think I'm going to work these ones up a little bit because the larger petals will cover that. So I'm going to go in a V shape with all of these. So it gets the point where I am adding the petals, but also gets the sides a little bit so they're not too loose. So I'll work my way around and I'll pull them away as I go. But really this is, especially when you're working with these, it's trial and error. Just go with what makes you happy. Like, if you're really looking to make them realistic, it's honestly just practice. You're going to just keep trying and trying with them, and one day you will be happy with how they look. So I'm starting with my tighter ones, so that it's a little bit tight at the center of the flower. And you'll see I'm going up a little bit higher than the base, and that's because these larger petals are going to cover that. So I don't have to worry. And it also, your leaves can cover it too. So if you need to put petals higher up so you can create the look you're going for, do it, because you can always find lower layers to cover it, or you can use leaves to cover up anything else, especially with these types of like bigger blooms. So you'll see we'll keep working my way around, kind of in a certain order, but I'll start to pull my shapes and create different little patterns. And I do like to flip it over so I can see where I have dead space so that I can add petals in there. Because sometimes when you're working completely upside down, you lose that. So I can see where I've got a couple of patches, so I'm going to go in and add those on. Got one right here. I would love, we've done this as a series, I would love to know in the comments what your favorite flower has been this past month to watch the assembly on. I know some of them seem really complicated and then they actually end up being extremely easy to put together. Like the fringed tulip really shocked me. I was like, I'm never going to be able to do that one. I literally said, I was like, that looks so complicated. How do you make that? And I found that one to actually be the easiest to work with. So never say you can't do something because you will always prove yourself wrong. I really love the rose as well. I think that one, especially with that fold and form tool, you can make it so beautiful. And Debbie Farinella just showed me some that she made today, and they are stunning. They actually asked her if they were real roses. The shape looked so realistic, which I think those will be coming out soon, or if they haven't already come out, be on the lookout for that. But yeah, drop in the comments what your favorite flower is that we came out with. So we came out with the ranuncula, the fringed tulip, a carnation, a classic rose, the peony, and the California poppy. And I can't wait to see what you all create with them. And we always love to see what other types of things you guys are making with them, aside from flowers too, with the crepe paper. So be sure to share everything with our hashtag #MyMakingStory, because that's what we're always looking to see what you're making and share it with everybody, because you are inspiring us sometimes more than you realize. Okay, so now I've got my middle layer on, and as you can see, it just keeps getting wider and wider. I do see a little bit of a patch right here, but that's okay because I'm going to go in and that's where I'm going to start my first bigger petal, and that'll fill that little patch in. So now with these, there's going to be 2 tricks I use with this. So this one, again, do the V shape, and that's just because when I'm first putting these in, I'm going to do these ones a little bit closer to the stem. So what I like to do is get these on and then manipulate them. So we'll just add a bunch on, and then I'll pull the petals in the direction I want them to be. And as you can see, I'm not going in like a concentric pattern because I don't feel like wild peonies are perfectly structured. To me, they're wild and they don't look perfect, so I'm just putting them on where I feel like it. Sometimes I'll go like in a row, but I'll do them at differing heights, and I'll pull the petals away so that they're not perfectly round. And then you'll see I've got some that are a little bit more folded in, so they'll create more of an organic shape. And I won't always do the V. Sometimes I'll just do right here at the bottom, because I want to be able to pull that petal further away from the base and make it more full. Because when peonies open, they open really wide. One thing I will say that's helpful is when you're working with crepe paper flowers, go on Google and type in the type of flower you're working with and look at how they're structurally kind of organized, like each layer of petals. Because that helped me a lot when I started to first work with crepe paper flowers, because sometimes you're just like, okay, well, I guess that looks like the flower I'm working with. But the reality is it looked nothing like the flower I was working with. So I found it really helpful to have like a visual next to me. When I was initially learning how to shape and mold petals, it's very helpful. So you can see it's starting to get much bigger, and obviously the more petals you add, the bigger it's going to get. But there is a really fun trick with this particular layer of petals that I'm going to show you next. Just want to get this first layer of them on. And then I'll start to show what else I do with them. So another trick with these is to fold the petal in a different direction, like the base of the petal. That way they then start to open up more towards the bottom, and it actually creates the effect of a really full bloom. I could be happy with that right there. That's a really full, beautiful flower, but I want them to feel a little bit more realistic. So what I'm going to do is take this, and I'm going to use my fold-in form to shape the base of the petal the opposite direction. Now you're still going to put glue there. This is where it gets really fun. So I'm going to put this on, and you can see, because I put it that way, it now is curving down. I'm probably going to move these ones a little bit higher up and use my leaves to cover them. But all it is just taking this and curling it the opposite direction so that it feels like it's peeling away from the flower. And it just will create a more open effect. Now, once they're on, I'll probably even shape them a little bit more that direction. And then I'll glue down the petals a little bit here and there just to have them stick. But the tops of them will still peel away. And I'm not using a lot of glue to do this, but you can see what it does, that effect it gives when you're putting them around the bottom like that. So I'll put the rest of them on real quick, and then we'll work on some finishing touches. Now, I could have done half the petals I did here today, but what fun would that be to not show you the full potential of what you can actually create with some of these flowers, like how big you can make the blooms. You can obviously make them smaller. You can use half of what I used today and still end up with a really beautiful flower like the one I showed you when I started filming. And that is nice in and of itself, especially if you're doing a bouquet. Like, you might not want to make more than like 2 or 3 of these really full ones, and then you might go with some medium and some small sizes. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's the beauty of crafting, is you get to pick and decide what you want to make. Now, actually, that bouquet I showed, that has been sitting in my office desk for a couple weeks now, and it just makes me so happy every time I look at it. Okay, so I've got all of my petals on now. Got this really beautiful bloom. I'm going to like manipulate some of the petals a little bit, curve them a little bit here and there. I'm going to glue some of them down in place, just strategically. So that it's not super wild. It still feels a little bit controlled. But I get this really beautiful peony, which I am excited about. So now, this is the fun part. Finish it up. These you can put some wire onto and do a front and a back, and then add them onto the stem like this one, where it's its own separate thing. And then you can have some flowers right there. I like with the peony because that's kind of usually where you find the flowers, is I like to use them to cover up anywhere where I've got lines where I don't want the petal lines to show. So I'll like strategically place these. So I'm just pulling these apart just so they're a little bit, they just feel a little bit rumpled, which I think leaves usually, they're not like perfectly shaped all the time. So this one I'm going to put right here because it had a little bit of hole. So then what you're going to do is you will normally then start taking floral tape, which looks like I forgot to bring in here with me, which is what happens when it's live. You would take floral tape, wrap it around all the way down the stem. Very similar to what we did on this one. It's got the floral tape wrapped all the way down so that it creates some stability for the flower, but you can see the greenery just kind of popping out there on the edge, and that is how you assemble our new wild peony. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial on how to make our beautiful wild peony. Like I said, you can make them very full, you can make them a little bit more wild and not have as many layers. You can make single flowers, you can make bouquets, you can do garlands and wreaths, and I think you can even use these on gift wrap, like do really pretty ribbon and then tuck a couple of these in at the top. That would be pretty. You can wrap napkin rings with them for bridal showers and baby showers. Obviously a lot of work for that, but again, you could do smaller ones. But I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please pop it in the comments. We'll be sure to answer, and have fun making. I can't get enough of the crepe paper, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I do, and we look forward to seeing what you are able to create with it as well.